Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order. And before I do that, I just want to say a warm welcome to Ms. Goodrich for joining us today, as well as to Mr. Dhaliwal. Obviously, the committee missed you a lot, and we've decided that we wanted to have you back for a visit, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome to meeting number 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and, of course, for our members as a reminder. For those who are participating on Zoom, please click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Also, for those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you could select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And I want to remind everyone to please not speak over each other, as it will be hard for our translators to translate and it will make their job difficult. Of course, ensure all your comments are addressed through the chair and members in the room. And, this is, Souk, just in case you have forgotten, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. The clerk and I will manage the order as best as we can. I'll also give everybody a 1-minute warning when you're about a minute away from the end of your time, and that's for the members as well as for our speakers. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. So with that, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on September 16, 2025, the committee is resuming its study on Canada's immigration system. Et maintenant, je vais pratiquer ma français.
And now I will practice my French. I would now like to welcome our witnesses who will participate in our panel. From the Accueil Francophone du Manitoba, Bindu Sako, Executive Director appearing by video conference. From Éducation Internationale, Lisiane Vanderknap, Executive Director appearing by video conference. Jérôme Carrette, Director of Education Services, Adult Sector, Lac Saint-Jean School Services Center, appearing by video conference. And Odile René, Regulated Immigration Consultant for International Students. Thank you. So I believe that we will start with Ms. Sako. I now invite you to make an opening statement of 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear honorable members of the committee, I would like to thank the members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Accueil Francophone du Manitoba. I am Bitun Sako, and I have been with the Accueil Francophone since its creation in December 2003. While we have been around for 20 years, we face a paradox today. On one hand, the federal government has sent a positive and clear signal by increasing Francophone immigration targets for the coming years, aiming to reach 10% by 2027. On the other hand, this ambition comes at a time when overall immigration levels in Canada are declining. This raises a crucial question. How can we welcome more Francophones in a sustainable way if the means to do so are not in place? We welcome the increase in the targets, but it must come with investments to support the settlement, integration, and retention of these individuals at the heart of our communities. Without that, this ambition will stay an empty promise. I will talk about 4 themes: immigration levels, the asylum system, the immigration process, and strategies that we need to implement. 1. Immigration levels. The FCFA is right to note that the federal government remains consistent with its commitment. The increase in percentage targets stabilizes the number of French-speaking immigrants to around 30,000 per year. Despite the decrease of the overall immigration target, this is an essential protection to reverse the demographic decline of our communities. However, make no mistake, stabilizing the number of French-speaking newcomers is not enough. A study by the FCFA has shown that at least 12% is needed to achieve this. With 2 years to go before the 10% target deadline and several years of delays, we are far from the mark. What's more, the challenge is twofold. Crucial programs are already underfunded and geographically limited. Increasing the target percentage without increasing recruitment resources is like widening the front door without increasing the size of the room, meaning that we are inviting people in without increasing our capacity to accommodate them. Added to this pressure is a new reality, the dramatic increase in the number of French-speaking asylum seekers in our communities, particularly in Manitoba. This phenomenon is a direct consequence of recent policy changes. These people often arrive in extremely vulnerable situations and turn to our organizations, which are on the front lines. Yet no additional or dedicated funding is planned to meet this growing demand. Our reception facilities are overwhelmed, forced to do more with the same resources. This jeopardizes the quality of reception for all newcomers. The immigration process. Once they arrive, French-speaking immigrants face many obstacles. They face two challenges. First, the language challenge. Even if they are French speakers, many need to update their language skills to adapt to our environment. This needs to be funded. This means both learning English and French language refresher courses in the Canadian professional context. If settlement services by Francophones and for Francophones are not better funded, integration takes longer, leading to discouragement and prolonged dependence. The risk is huge. When a newcomer does not find the necessary support within the French-speaking community, they risk assimilating and drifting away from the community without realizing it. We do all that upstream recruitment work only to lose them. Strategies and recommendations. In the face of these challenges, concrete and urgent solutions are needed. In order to fully fund programs such as Destination Canada and expand their reach to tap into the vast pool of Francophone talent around the world. We will only be able to achieve our goal if we give ourselves the means to do so. It is also imperative to allocate direct, stable, and adequate funding to French language settlement services, with a specific budget to respond to the influx of asylum seekers. We ask that these services be managed by French-speaking organizations to specifically help French-speaking immigrants. Finally, we need to ensure that programs that work and award additional points to Francophones, such as the Express Entry system, are protected and continued. In conclusion, the government's commitment is a first step. But for the numbers to become integrated and fulfilled people in our communities, we need to move from ambition to action. Let us give ourselves the means to achieve our ambitions. Let's invest in our reception structures to ensure not only the future of these newcomers, but also the vitality and sustainability of French-speaking communities in Canada. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Sacco. Now, we will listen to the statement by Ms. Van der Nap. Thank you for welcoming us here. I will speak on behalf of the three people who are here representing our organization. We are a cooperative that brings together Quebec's school services and school boards, which are public institutions that offer vocational training in their territories. Our co-op works with these institutions to attract international students to vocational training programs. We have two goals. We want to inform parliamentarians here that vocational training in Quebec is a unique system in the country. And we advocate for more fairness and consistency in the choices made by IRCC over the past year or so regarding foreign students in Canada. Quebec's public vocational training is made up of 174 training centers that provide more than 200 programs in 21 industries to approximately 130,000 students throughout Quebec. Vocational training is an essential pillar of Quebec's education system. It is there to meet workforce needs of specialized trades. It offers short, practical training programs tailored to the needs of the labor market. The approach is based on matching training to employment opportunities. According to data published by the Quebec's Ministry of Employment on the labor market, 80% of vocational training programs are identified as leading to jobs in fields that face labor shortages. It should also be noted that a significant number of occupations most affected by persistent shortages are related to vocational training, including orderlies, nursing assistants, machinists, amongst many others. In recent years, vocational training in Quebec has attracted no more than 1% of Canada's international students. In 2024, there were around 10,000 international students in the public system, a record year. Approximately 3,000 to 4,000 students were enrolled in 138 institutions outside of Montreal, for an average of 25 students per institution. These are very small numbers compared to, for example, the 27,000 international students at the University of Toronto. Even though our institutions have few international students, they help fill cohorts and maintain the availability of training programs for Quebecers who wish to pursue these courses. After their training, Quebecers and international students can fill jobs that are in high demand in their respective communities. For some programs, placement rates are close to 100%. However, despite these facts, the current rules is stifling the ability of Quebec to attract international students. Since November 2024, the imposition of an eligibility criterion based on the field of study and giving access to the post-graduation work permit, the PGWP, means that only 55 programs are eligible for it, down from 142 previously. By 2026, this list can be further reduced to 35 programs. Among the programs that are currently non-eligible, there are 40 programs that lead to occupations that currently face a documented labor shortage or face one or will face one in the future. IRCC tells us that the restrictive issuance of PGWPs was decided based on available labor market data. However, it is difficult to believe that all university programs have higher placement rates than vocational training programs for orderlies or mechanics. Increased spending on defense and on the shipbuilding industry, along with 3 major projects announced by the Carney government for Quebec, is creating significant demand in skilled trades in Quebec. Without adjustments, Canada will find it difficult to deliver on these strategic projects. As proof, at the end of September 2025, Éducation Internationale conducted a survey of public vocational training centers to determine how the PGWP measure impacts their ability to attract international students. 44% of respondents reported a 50% or greater drop in the enrollment. And 20 of the surveyed institutions reported that they needed to cancel or postpone 77 cohorts during the school year. Across Quebec as a whole, this number is certainly even higher. Respondents told us that several programs have been weakened by the drop of number of international students. Some of these programs are directly linked to the investment of the current government, such as land surveyors and heavy vehicle mechanics. We're here to advocate that the Government of Canada fully recognizes vocational training in its immigration decisions. We request that IRCC reinstate access to PGWPs for vocational training programs that meet real labor market needs. Thank you for considering the fact that international students arrive in small numbers and are spread across 150 institutions across the province. They are essential to maintaining training opportunities throughout Quebec. They meet significant labor needs, particularly for major infrastructure projects in Canada. Without an adjustment, thousands of positions in fields with labor shortages will remain vacant. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vandernap. We will now start the question and answers period. Mr. Davies, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was particularly interested in Ms. Vandernap's comments, and I wanted to pick up on that. But if you don't mind, I'd like to give you a bit of a picture of what's happening in my neck of the woods in the Niagara area. As you may know, Niagara College is one of Canada's most well-recognized colleges. But one of the things I've been hearing over the last couple of months with the changes of the program is that somebody coming into Canada as an international student, in the past, if they were on a 3-year program, for example, they would generally have the ability to get a work permit for a post-grad placement in Canada. Now we're seeing, for example, that, and Ms. Vandernap, I want you to correct me if I am incorrect here. The changes the government put in place, for example, if you go to a university now and get a general arts degree, perhaps in philosophy or anthropology, you've got a better chance of getting a work permit coming out of a university than you do out of a trade school. I'll give an example. In Niagara College, we have world-class culinary program, distillery program, brewery program, and a hotel and hospitality program that services a good portion of the Niagara region. And you made mention that the acceptance of students must also be based on labor market analysis or regional analysis. But the changes that have taken place, I think, if you would comment, disproportionately impacted those that are going into trades where Canada really needs these workers, but we're now not giving them an opportunity to work here. Would you agree with that?
C'est exactement ce qu'on a présenté.
That's exactly what we said. It's true that the programs in the arts are eligible for a PGWP when everything from trade schools are disadvantaged, and it's harder to receive a work permit following that.
Ms. Vandernap, when these changes were initiated by the government, what did you or your colleagues, how did you respond to that? Because it was a severe blow to the training programs that, including Blue Seal and Red Seal programs, where Canada sorely needs people in certain disciplines in trades, particularly in construction, framing, electricians, plumbers, anything in the Blue Seal trade. To me, seems like there is unless changes are made, we're going to lose opportunities and students that we might otherwise bring to Canada for these programs and trainings. We may not attract them at all. Would you agree with that?
Oui, puis nous,
Yes. When we look at the data of our surveys, we see that the attractiveness of vocational programs saw a significant drop. That's what we're seeing. More than 50% of training centers have told us that they saw a more than 50% drop. So it has a serious impact. Jérôme is from a regional vocational training, and maybe he can tell us about what he sees in his neck of the woods. Can I go? So for the Lac-Saint-Jean region, we're in the north of Quebec, around 200 kilometers north of Quebec City. If you look at the situation of our center that provides vocational training, up to 15 of them over the past few years, between 2023 and 2024, we saw 70 new enrollments. That dropped to 55 in 2024-2025, and now we're down to 29. We're not a huge school board, but this quality is the same. Earlier, someone mentioned 174 vocational training schools across the province, and this is something we see in all of these vocational schools. If you look at our 15 programs, pretty much everyone manages to find jobs after graduation. So this means that we currently cannot provide enough graduates to fill labor needs.
Merci. Alors.
Affected by the drop in the number of programs that you now provide.
Madame Vandernap.
on n'a pas
We don't have the numbers of this year because we weren't able to get the data for the entire province. That data will be available later. But Éducation Internationale saw a 50% drop. But data for the entire province is not available yet. Jérôme gave an example for his vocation training, where they saw a drop higher than 50%.
Madam Chair, how much time do we have?
Perfect timing, 0
There you go.
seconds. Next, we go to Mr. Zuberi for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for all the witnesses who are here on Zoom. Ms. Sacco, I would like to start with you. Recently, you appeared at the Official Languages Committee. You also talked about many challenges faced by students. For example, challenges in French Africa or for visa agents. There is a high rate of arbitrary refusals. What recommendations do you have for us to address these issues, including systemic barriers? I think you are on mute. For student visas, you talked about systemic barriers and high numbers. Exactly. And I believe that you talked about these issues at another committee. Yes, a few years ago. This is the recommendation that I would give to the government to verify with embassies, because many embassies answered the requests of many countries, especially in the Francophone areas of Africa. So work with the embassies to see if it's possible to provide visas instead of going through many countries that require visa requests. That's one recommendation. And the pool is fairly big for them to recruit and to allow more stable French-speaking countries to have the authority to issue visas, to increase that rate. So these problems still exist, even though you brought it up many years ago. Yes, there's been one change. We saw an increase in the number from French-speaking African countries, but more work needs to be done because some refusers are not justified. They have good files, but they still are being refused. But since then, we have seen changes. Thank you. One of the biggest investments by RCC is for organizations that provide services to newcomers. Can you explain the importance of these services for new immigrants, especially French-speaking new immigrants? You must understand the following. There is general immigration and recruitment, but settlement services for French communities is within a very specific vision, and not taking into account that vision means that it gets lost in the overall immigration vision. Francophones are responsible for doing liaison work with the community, so increasing the Francophone space, of course. There already is an isolation of Francophone communities. So that increases linguistic insecurity. So when we do a lot of work to recruit French-speaking people to come here to increase the presence of Francophone communities, and in the vision of this expansion, there aren't enough resources invested to help French-speaking people who are already in a minority situation. There is no help to help them integrate, to overcome language barriers, and to find a job. And to find a job quickly, and also recognizing their foreign credentials. So that is a big shortfall. And these services are there to support them to ensure a quick and smooth integration. You have 1 minute left. I imagine that Francophones outside of Quebec face many barriers and more barriers compared to immigrants outside of Anglophone immigrants, right? Yes. So IRCC investments are critical to integrate Francophones outside of Quebec. Exactly. We ask the government to invest in this vision. There already is a plan for Francophone immigration. That is true. But having a financial program for Francophone immigration into OLMCs is even more important. Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. Now, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also like to thank our witnesses. I'm very happy to welcome someone from Alma, my hometown. That being said, we talked about the drastic drops across vocational schools in Quebec. Ms. Van der Napt, can you talk to us about how that affects the long-term sustainability of programs? Yes. As I've said, we have 20 institutions that had to delay 77 classes. Amongst the programs, there are programs for mechanics, there are healthcare programs, secretary and accounting programs. So there is a real impact to these institutions and their capacity to provide programs. Jérôme maybe can talk about the specific programs that have been weakened. Mr. Garrett, over to you, please. Yes, as I've said, the more than 50% drop in international students barely represented 14% of all our enrolled students. So we're not talking about complete classes of international students, but they are still crucial for us. It reduces the amount of people that we can train to work in regional businesses. It also limits our ability to provide certain programs. I wouldn't say that these programs are compromised now, but they might be. For example, in one program, a quarter of them are international students. This does not only provide workers, but if they weren't there, maybe financially we cannot start a class.
Machining.
So there are different programs such as machining that are in a more precarious situation than others. Often it's the 9th or the 10th international student that allows us to start a class. Or else, according to rules, we might have to start classes at a loss. When we talk about international students, and this is why I think it's super interesting that you're here, we often talk about university students or in Quebec, CEGEPs. We rarely talk about vocational training. So can you tell the committee how your program depends on the regional economic ecosystem. That will be quite interesting for our analysts, for them to understand the link between your programs and the local economy. I can give you statistics and examples. If you look at recent studies, around 80% of vacant positions are for jobs that require vocational training. I talked about the high placement rate, close to 100% for almost all our programs. So it is hard for us to actually meet the needs of businesses. If you look at concrete programs, for example, for orderlies, which is one of the programs that we offer. Last time we met with the regional healthcare network, they told us that if they can just provide us all our graduates tomorrow, they will still need that and another class. So this is a professional diploma that requires 700 hours, so below the 900-hour limit, and that means that they are now eligible for PGWPs. So people who are in that field need to go through a lot of bureaucracy to obtain a closed work permit. So the 900-hour restriction has an impact on labor availability for local businesses. Let's go to another sector, for example, welding. There's a regional business called Proco, a very, very important community player. They're worth around $170 million. And once again, they do not have enough people. Restrictions of the past few years on the PGWP. In the case of welding, it's much more about work permits that are open. And that is also a barrier that explains why there has been a drop of international students. And that prevents us from providing qualified welders to local businesses. Very quickly. These decisions were justified because it was challenging for the settlement capability. How do you welcome them? Is it easy for you to welcome them in your communities and to integrate them? Very quick answer, please. Yes. If we want it to work for international students, for businesses, and for the community, we need to provide services. We worked with our neighboring school board to create a settlement structure. Sometimes we even welcome them at the airport. We help them find a place to live. We help them integrate and be included in our organizations, and that makes a difference. These are not huge numbers. Thank you, Mr. Carret. Thank you, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. Now we will move on to the second round of questions, starting from Mr. Ma, 5 minutes.
My questions will be addressed to Ms. Vander Knaap. You gave testimony to Quebec's Committee on Citizenship Relations in October. You were advocating for the full recognition of vocational training as a core driver of economic, regional, and linguistic development. Can you walk me through your recommendation on how to tie international students' admissions to the needs of both regions and specific skill trades?
Odile, tu veux-tu répondre? Ou je peux y aller aussi? OK. Oui, ben, en fait, ce qu'on a...
What we recommended Quebec's citizen relationship was similar to what we're recommending today. We want vocational training to be seen as an education field just as important as university education. Quebec and Canada needs engineers and doctors, yes. But how can a hospital work without nurses and orderlies? How can a factory run? How can you build icebreakers without machinists and mechanics and welders? It's an essential level of training. And vocational training is there to meet the needs of the labor market. If the labor market has no need, then we will not provide a program. The skills that are needed are the skills that we teach. And we hope that we can train workers that will be sought after in all regions. As there are 174 vocational institutions in Quebec, programs are distributed according to a program based on needs of the region. For example, mine training for miners, there are training programs in places where there are mines, so Abitibi, Chibougamau, for example. And vocational training will fill classes with international students. There are 130,000 students, but we need more than 130,000 people. According to there are around 6,000 to 7,000 of them who are international students. And without international students, it's very hard to reach our targets. So despite the Quebec government's efforts to attract local Quebecers to partake in these programs, it's not enough. So we went to look abroad to fill these classes. And as my colleague Jérôme said, placement rates, and that is the case in Lac-Saint-Jean as well as in other regions, placement rates are very high. Here are some of the needs of the labor market. So construction jobs, that's vocational training. They need 16,000 new people every year until 2030. The shipbuilding industry, along the St. Lawrence River, 2,000 jobs for the construction of an icebreaker. So mechanics and welders, for example. For Hydro-Quebec and their major projects, they need 35,000 workers by 2035. Once again, vocational training. Orderlies, which Jérôme brought up. There is a shortage of 6,000 orderlies in Quebec. And I can go on and on. There's aerospace. They have 40,000 jobs that need to be filled in the next 10 years. Vocational training is critical. And we are here to ensure that people recognize that vocational training is strategic. We also want immigrants to work in French, but after their training, they learn French and they can work in French.
On with that, in your testimony, you also noted the discrepancy of postgraduate work permit allocations with all university degrees that you just also mentioned you wanted to equalize. Do you believe that our immigration system, especially as related to international student permit allocation, should be more closely tied with our national and provincial labor market needed?
Une réponse très vite.
Very short answer. That's what we believe in, and the data supports it. You need to look at the labor market needs documented by governments. And you see that vocational training needs a lot of workers. Next, Ms. Zaid, 5 minutes.
To the witnesses for appearing before the committee today. My first question is for Madame Sacco. The federal government has set ambitious targets for the Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. And last year we exceeded our targets. And as a result, we have now set even more ambitious targets for the years to come. Can you tell us about how your organization views the importance of focusing on the Francophone immigration outside of Quebec and what these targets mean for protecting the Francophone communities across Canada?
Thank you for your question. Yes. For the Francophone community, we talk about the vitality of Francophone communities outside of Quebec. Earlier, I talked about linguistic security and that how the targets were based on that. It's to solve a declining demography. This builds capacity to allow these people who come to our communities and ensure that they are well supported and they can settle and then integrate and stay. When these people do not stay in the community, then it's like effort that we have invested and then has been lost. So yes, we need more resources. It's important that the government sees the big picture of overall Francophone immigration, including Francophone international students, refugees, and economic immigrants who are Francophones. I also spoke about asylum seekers earlier, as well as temporary foreign workers outside of Quebec. There needs to be proper funding so that support and integration of these immigrants are done smoothly. Targets will not allow the Francophone community to reach the 12%, but it is still a significant progress for our communities.
Next question also for you. In your view, what are the most significant barriers that the Francophone newcomers face when they arrive here in Canada? Whether it is the credential recognition, it's the language instruction, or the pathway navigation, and how do you think federal policies should be aligned to address the barriers the Francophone community faces?
When it comes to the obstacles that you mentioned, I think that there needs to be a concerted effort to work with communities, as Francophone immigration programs are part of a strategy. So looking at these strategies, there has been a lot of studies conducted. There are advisory committees that worked on this issue to see where the government can invest. Language training is very important. You have 1 minute left. You talked about recognition of foreign credentials. So working with provinces and professional orders to ensure that people can start working as soon as possible. Also consult studies that have already been conducted to find recommendations on where to invest to help Francophone immigrants in those communities.
OK, après, on a...
Thank you. Now, Mr. Brunel Duceppe, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Vanderknap, let's say the following thing happens. Tomorrow morning, you wake up as the Minister of Immigration. You have full powers of a federal immigration minister. What will you change? To ensure that Éducation Internationale will do better tomorrow. You have 24 hours. We want to see the vocational training sector be better, not just ourselves do better. But first, consult. Well, maybe not enough, 24 hours is not enough, but it's to reestablish this balance, to look at the labor market as well as the situation in schools. I cannot speak on behalf of other provinces, but I need to say what are Quebec's needs when it comes to innovation and as well as workforce needs. We see that there is a lack of balance between vocational schools and universities. So we need to take a detailed look at where the needs are. And we also need to get rid of the 900-hour criteria. For us, that's a very arbitrary criteria because orderly training is below 900 hours, and yet a lot of people look for orderlies. The same goes for other vocational training. So reviewing those criteria to ensure that they are less arbitrary and more based on labor market needs. So also wondering why prioritizing graduate students, for example. I also hope that IRCC officers understands vocational training. We are different compared to the Canadian system, so there are a lot of administrative errors. So some students meet all eligibility criteria and yet see their study permit refused because IRCC agents who process their files do not understand the system. So when you talk about open permits, do you mean open permits for their partners? Because currently, people in graduate studies are eligible for that. Am I out of time? Yes. Thank you for all that information. Thank you. Next, Mr. Ma, you have 5 minutes.
My questions will continue with Ms. Vandernaap. Given your focus on protecting programs that lead in-demand and high-skilled professions, I want to build on that focus. Should our international student admissions be further tied to housing considerations?
Probablement, en effet.
Probably. We often hear that international students put pressure on housing availability. We know that there are housing shortages across many regions, yet we also need workers to build those houses. And construction workers are people who have received vocational training. There are barriers to bringing them in. For example, not all training provide 900 hours of training, and they do not all lead to PGWPs. They can help solve the problem. And once again, our numbers are small. 10,000 foreign students in Quebec was a record year for us. Or else it's usually between 6,000 to 7,000 people. Most of them were in 138 institutions outside of Quebec. And Mr. Garrett said that they can support the 70 or so students who are there and find housing for them. So we are small compared to other larger institutions that take in thousands of students. But we are in another space. So yes, you need to take into consideration settlement capacity. But you cannot just look at the forest, you need to look at the trees.
Within Quebec where you think international students would struggle to find affordable housing at current rent prices? I hear what you said about the demand that they would be addressing, but let's focus on their own housing problem at this point. So again, my question is do the international students would struggle in any particular part of Quebec where there are high costs of living?
Je vais laisser ma collègue Odile compléter.
I will ask my colleague Odile answer that because she is in closer contact with a lot of institutions. But if I understand correctly, when there is no availability for students, then vocational training institutions do not accept students because they do not want to send students home because the students cannot find housing.
Are you constantly monitoring the housing situation for students before you do admissions?
Vas-y, Odile.
As Lysiane said, vocational training centers are the best positions because they are on the ground. they will see whether there is sufficient settlement capacity to recruit internationally. They recruit in small numbers, so they can provide services to welcome them, to find housing, etc. So it's the schools that do that monitoring work.
And tying back to an earlier response you had, where you indicated you're not getting enough international students to fill the classrooms. And then on the other hand, you're saying you're only allocating small amounts just in case there are housing issues. Can you elaborate on all of these answers to give us a better perspective of how this program is being managed?
1 minute.
Ben, peut-être, je peux laisser
Jérôme maybe can explain how it works in Alma. So the targets, the number of students, and the impact on the community. So I cannot speak on behalf of all of Quebec, but in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, we created a mechanism to welcome and promote the inclusion of international students. So first, we established our own targets. So around 20% of our programs, of our students are international. So we created that cap to then create a support system. For example, support navigating the immigration system and welcoming them at the airport, amongst others. 20% was the upper limit that we established 2 years ago. But last year, we were only at 14%. And this year, it will be below 10%. So we are really below our theoretical capacity limit that we created.
Yuma. Our last question for this session is Ms. Sodi for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here with us today. My first question is to Ms. Sacco. Canada currently has 2 programs specifically for Francophones, the first one being the Francophone Community Immigration Pilot, and the second one being the Francophone Minority Communities Student Pilot. Are you able to tell us about your experiences with these programs? What needs do they respond to, and what is the impact that they've had within the community that you've observed?
I will start by talking about the pilot project for students who have just arrived. Most Francophone universities sign agreements with IRCC to allow students who come and who enroll and make sure that after their studies, there is a pathway to permanent residency. That is also part of the question surrounding the vitality of Francophone communities, because these students have spent 4 years in a Francophone setting. They learned a lot. So then there is a easy pathway to PR. The other pilot project for rural Francophone communities is also there to bring in temporary workers and allow them to then have PR. But these workers can also receive benefits from the establishment. That help immigrants. Most international students are not eligible, except international students who come under this specific pilot project, who go to schools who have signed agreements with IRCC. They can have access to institutional benefits, as well as temporary workers who come under the pilot rural immigration project.
I just want to further elaborate a little bit more on federal supports. Are you able to tell us how federal support programs contributed to settlement success in smaller Francophone communities like those in Manitoba? And what recommendations do you have that would help improve outreach and retention in these regions?
Les programmes fédéraux ont
Federal programs, more specifically in Manitoba, well, there are several Francophone service providers that receive funding from IRCC to support Francophone immigrants in a specific stream. There is also the Francophone Immigration Network that works with these organizations that received funding from the government in order to better support Francophone immigrants who come and settle in Francophone communities. So if I have to give a recommendation, earlier I talked about an increase in numbers. Manitoba is part of the communities that are in a minority setting. So increasing targets needs to go hand in hand with increase of financial resources. That will have an impact on the ability of these organizations to provide the proper services to all people who come here. So the more resources provided, the better stability can be provided and services can be provided to these immigrants who come to our communities.
On time, but we know that the government has invested in newcomer women support, entrepreneurship, language training. Are you able to tell us what kinds of federal support for immigrant women in particular has been the most impactful?
Très, très vite, s'il vous plaît.
Very quick answer, please. Currently, I think that there is a national strategy done with the Women's Federation. Women immigrants are part of this strategy, and this has repercussions across provinces because they worked with centers that specifically provide services to women immigrants. The strategy was launched last year and tackles issues surrounding isolation and training for women who are immigrants so they can go to school. It's an issue of employability as well as the support network that will allow these women to be part of the labor force.
Sodhi. I'm going to go to Mr. Manegakis in a minute, but I do want to follow up on one question that Mr. Ma had asked, and this is to Ms. Vander Knapp. There was a question around whether we should ensure that we are meeting the labor needs of the provinces, and you have said you absolutely agree with that. My question to you is, do you feel that we have sufficient local and regional skill and labor data, not only in Quebec, but across our country? Do you feel that we have that sufficient data readily available?
Je suis pas en mesure de répondre pour les provinces hors.
I cannot answer on behalf of provinces outside of Quebec. Education is a provincial jurisdiction, so we do not do studies outside of Quebec. But in Quebec, I would say yes. There is an institution that identifies labor force needs for 516 occupations. If these occupations face a labor shortage or whether there is a surplus of labor or there's an equilibrium, and that is regularly updated. So we can determine how many people we need in these fields. That's just for Quebec.
Information, I appreciate it. So thanks everyone for their questions. Before we finish up, Mr. Manegakis would like to propose something.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, with consent of the committee, can we consider the evidence we heard today as part of the international student study? All three parties brought up some really good information today. It'd be a shame for that to go to waste. So I wonder if we can get the consent from everyone here to include the testimony that we heard today that came out as part of the international student study program.
I'm seeing a thumbs up. Do I have a thumbs up? Yes. So it looks like that's unanimous. That's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Managakis. Thank you. And I want to finish off by saying thanks to the witnesses for the excellent testimony. I want to thank all of my colleagues for the excellent questions. We're now going to suspend for about 5 minutes or so just to say goodbye to our witnesses formally and to go in camera for committee business. So we're going to suspend.
you.